4. Hey, whoa, 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 whoa. I thought we were doing a pad demo. I mean, I brought my own pads. We're going to make pads today, right? I mean, we're good. I got foam.
So what you take a nap on
No,
in your office?
no. I brought pads. We were doing, well, you already have them pre-made, but I was bringing my own foam, Lake Country. And, you know, they gave me some foam.
We are going to talk about pads, but I thought I'd share a buffing technique tip first.
Oh, all right. Tips and tricks first. All right. Hey, thank you all for coming into another live session of, I don't know what you want to call this, Facebook Live, Autogeek, whatever you want to call it. If you have any questions or have anything that you want answered over buffing, buffing pads, I should say, post them down in the comments down below. And I'm going to take my foam, since you don't,
go that way.
You're not going to.
How about this for a title? Autogeeks by the seat of your pants.
By the seat of your pants. Hey, that works. All right. Well, hold on one sec. Let me get over here. Thank you all for tuning in. I do appreciate each and every one of you that tunes into these little things.
No doubt. Hey, thanks for being here. And before we get started about pads, and as you can see up here, I got a lot of different pads. And I don't have every pad on the market, but I got a great representation. And this talk isn't so much about the pad, what it's made of. It's about the practical aspect, how you and I are going to use these pads, because that's what's really going to be the most important to you when you go out to the garage to work on whatever your project is. But before we get started, I wanted to share a little tip. Now, a lot of the tips I share when it comes to detailing cars are just techniques that I've learned from trial and error over my career in the detailing world, but they're also things that I share in all my classes. And the people that attend my classes, some come are absolute newbies, they've never used a machine, and some come as seasoned veterans, they know a lot. But I still cover all the basics just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Here's the first tip I want to share. Whenever you're buffing out the roof, the hood, or even the trunk lid, especially on larger cars, trucks, and SUVs.
The big beasts.
The big things, yeah. What you want to do is you want to start in the middle of the panel from the side and work your way out. So as Yancy was walking in, I've already started at the back window. I've been working my way up, and I'll just kind of demonstrate what I mean by that. I'm going to start out here in the middle. I'm making my section passes, and remember a couple weeks ago we talked about counting. That would be 6, 7.
Oh, he's counting again.
8. There's my 8 section passes, but I started from the center line. You can always find the center line by finding the rear view mirror. That's
well, actually, that has a little piece of chrome right in the middle.
It does have a piece. It has a clip on the stainless steel trim, but that's how you'd find center, and then work that section, and then work the section closest to you.
And why is that?
And the reason for that is it's not a deal breaker, but every time you go to buff out a car, you can't be like guessing, like, how should I buff out the car today? You need to put into practice what I would call detailing best practices. Things that you just do normally over and over again because they make sense. And it makes sense to buff out the center and work towards you, because if you buff out this section and then move to the center, you're going to be dragging a lot of times your cord or your elbows or your arms and possibly marring the paint that you already polished. So just as a good practice, start at the center, work towards the outside. And then when you go to wipe off your residue, here's another little technique. Don't wipe off the complete far away edge, and when you go to the other side, you can see where it's overlapped into.
You're so smart.
See where you left off at. Anyway, that's a little technique tip. And gosh, while I'm here, a lot of times, whatever tool, whatever compound polish or cleaner wax I'm using, whatever my first step product is. So sometimes that's cleaner wax and AIO. Sometimes it might just be a polish, and sometimes it's a true dedicated compound. But whatever that product and pad combo is, as I'm buffing out the car, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the glass. Okay?
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just because I'm already at it, and usually your first step product is going to be your most aggressive product, especially I'm using a compound right now. But paint gets a dirt film on it, and everything on the outside gets this dirt film. And it's also on the glass, and a lot of times you can't see it, but it's there. So just, turn your polisher on, run it over the glass a few times. Glass isn't too picky about what you use on it.
As long as it isn't rocks and metal shavings.
it's not glass isn't too picky. As long as the product you're using is clear coat safe, it's glass safe, but this is only for what I call topical polishing, removing the film. If you've got scratches in the glass, that
from the
takes,
wiper marks and stuff like that.
Yeah, wiper marks, pits from rock chips, that would take a polish called cerium oxide. So one of my best practices is whenever I detail someone's car, I always polish up the glass. That way when they show up to pick up their car, not only is the paint all glossy, but the glass is glossy, and it just gives it a total bling look. And on these older cars, if you look up here, a lot of these older cars, they have stainless steel, chrome, and nickel trim. And just like the glass, stainless steel, chrome, nickel, even aluminum, they don't really care too much what you polish them with. Now, there can be a case made to say there are specialized polishes for stainless like there's aluminum. That's true. But I mean, as you're buffing up the car, if I just take and buzz over this, just trim just a couple of times.
It's going to clean it up pretty good.
As I'm hitting the glass and the paint, it's going to pull that oxidation off, and it's going to brighten that trim up as I'm working around the car. And you can see all that black stuff came off on my pad.
I got pretty dirty really quick.
So you know you pulled something off, but it's just a way. I always like to try to kill as many birds with one stone as I can, as the saying goes.
Work smarter, not harder.
And that's a saying that's thrown around pretty loosely. And usually what I find is people saying it, but then never show me how to implement it. Okay, so there we go. Let me sit down off here before I fall.
Yeah, that'd probably be a wise idea. I don't want to have that documented.
Oh, my cord's falling off. Okay, so today we're going to talk about buffing pads. And as you can see, I got a lot of different buffing pads here. But one of the key things when I originally brought this topic up to Yancy, and I think some other people brought this topic up too, was when we talk about detailing a car, if you're just starting out, normally you'll buy a polisher, and a lot of times you'll buy a polisher in a kit. And the kit will come with typically one cutting pad, one polishing pad, one finishing pad. So
enough to get you going, but you need a lot more than that.
Exactly. It gives you enough pads to kind of get you going. But the problem I always see is some people think that's what you need to buff out a car, and that's just enough to get you started. And the reason why is because, and I'm going to show you with this is kind of a bad example, Yancy, because I got it all
dirty
blackened
already?
Yeah, I already got it blackened with the aluminum, but I wanted to show the metal polishing. But here is a fresh, clean, this is a Lake Country 6.5-inch Force Hybrid orange foam cutting pad. Now, right now it's clean and dry. If I run my hand over, I can feel
I can hear it.
I can feel a sharpness to it. It's sharp. When I mix this with whatever my product is, a compound or maybe an all-in-one, it's going to get right in there and start correcting the paint, removing swirl scratches, water spots, and oxidation. After I've buffed out half that roof, this pad is no longer sharp.
Yeah, you can't hear it anymore.
It's soft. That's because that's the nature of foam. When it gets wet, it becomes softer. And if I tried to continue around the car using that pad, it would take me more section passes, more times to do less work. I'm going to be less effective with my time. And as this pad starts to saturate down to the adhesive that holds the Velcro on, you got to remember all these different orbital tools that we're all using nowadays. When you crank that sucker up to high speed, that is what I describe it like this. It's a violent action, okay? It's not so bad on the one if you're just putting a wax on. You crank this thing up to the 6, and then you push on it, and you buff for hours. That's a violent action under pressure over time. The product's going to go into the adhesive, to the Velcro. You'll see it start to show up on your backing plate. This isn't too bad, but it'll show up there. And what it's going to do is, I like to use the term torture. It's going to torture your pads, and they're not going to last very long. Now, if you took and purchased extra pads, and say after I did half the roof, before I go to the other side and knock out the other half, I put a fresh pad on, not only is this going to cut faster, I'm going to be more effective with my time, but I'm not going to punish my pads, and all my pads are going to last longer over time. So I'm going to protect my investment.
I think that ties into, I know you get this question a lot, is how many pads do I need to do a car? It kind of ties into what you're saying. So
exactly.
Let's go ahead and nail that right now, since you're kind of there.
In a perfect world, if you really wanted to work at maximum efficiency when using foam pads, because microfiber pads are different, and I'll talk about that. But if you're using foam pads, you'd have one pad per panel. So if you think about it, a 2-door car has 9 panels: roof, hood, trunk lid, fender, door, fender, fender, door, fender. Is that right? Yes, 9 panels.
You had to think about it.
I had my fingers out too. A four-door car would have 11 panels, and of course, you know, bigger trucks and stuff. But the idea being is to use more pads more often. So whatever the step you're doing, you're getting the maximum use out of the pad. Because once a pad becomes wet and saturated, it's no
Kind
longer
of working against you a little bit.
It's no longer doing what it's supposed to do. A cutting pad is no longer a cutting pad. A cutting pad is now a finishing pad.
Right.
You know, and you wouldn't think about trying to remove all the swirls or scratches of a car. The finishing pad, the compound, would be ridiculous. But most people don't think that way. And I always like to tell people that I don't tell them this because I work at Autogeek and I want you to go to the store and buy a lot of pads. I don't care where you buy your pads, but when you're getting ready to go out to the garage, you know, you need to go out there with more than one cutting pad, one polishing pad, and just one finishing pad. Make sense? So stock up on pads. You'll turn out better, work faster because you're going to be more efficient with the process you're doing. You'll be less tired, of course, and your pads are going to last longer over time.
Well, that works. Save money.
So that's really a key thing. And of course, you know, if you look back here, we got a lot of pads.
No, we just got 1 or 2. That's it.
So anyway, so that's one of the key things I wanted to talk about. Now, when we talk about microfiber pads compared to foam pads, and I'm just going to let me grab, this is a brand new one, I think. Isn't this some new ones by Buff and Shine? This is their Euro Wool.
Euro Wool, and the black one's the Euro
The Euro Wool blend and the Euro Fiber, okay? Now, the difference between buffing with foam pads and what I just generally call fiber pads is the thickness. For the most part, sometimes the foam pads are thin, but you have less absorbing material on a microfiber pad. Even the ones with a foam core have less foam overall than most foam pads. So the pad, so much, even if it gets wet, it's not the foam that's wet that you're buffing with the fibers. And you can take and blast these with an air squirter or even, you know, brush them and get some of that excess product off there and go back to work with them. So it's true that you can buff out a car if you're using microfiber or a micro wool pad. It'll take you less pads because you've got the fiber cutting for you, and saturation isn't as much of a problem.
Well, that's the difference. So one's a fiber and one's a foam. So one's sucking in, the other one's just kind of being right there. The fibers aren't sucking the chemicals in.
Nah, they just kind of hold everything off to the side. We'll talk about pad cleaning too.
All right.
So now that we kind of covered some things that I wanted to talk about to help you when you're buffing out a car, start in the center, work your way out, leave a residue line there so you know where you left off.
This broadcast is brought to you by Mike's Tip.
Glass and stainless steel polishing. The next thing I want to talk about is this foam, the evolution of foam pads. And I happen to probably be one of the few people in the world, we'll just start right here, that have one of these things. This is
Don't
called...
breathe too heavy on that.
This is called, yeah, the Woolless Wonder.
Here, I'm coming in.
And I actually had the opportunity in 1987, myself and some of the guys probably watching this video, we attended what was called a Train the Trainer meeting in Southern California with Meguiar's. And before that weekend, it was a weekend-long meeting, teaching us how to go out, represent the company the right way, and teach these training classes. I covered Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, calling on body shops, dealerships, and detail shops. And so it was a Train the Trainer meeting. But I got there a little bit early, and they had a big lunch at the Balboa Bay Club, and I had the opportunity to sit down and have lunch with Walter Cotton, the man that invented the foam pad.
Oh, there you go.
I'm going to open this up.
Like I said, don't breathe hard. I've seen the condition of that
This thing's really bad. So this came out in 1965, and I always like to put that in perspective for people, but some of you might not even know what I'm talking about. When this came out, Gilligan's Island debuted in black and white.
Can you take that very front flip?
I can't. It's so
No.
I know, I'm getting to it.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Oh, wow. Hello. See?
So the foam is completely deteriorating as I talk. It's going back downhill. But Gilligan's Island came out in black and white. The Mustang was invented. I know you Mustang guys will go, well, technically, Mike, the Mustang came out in 1964 and a half. And I go, I know, but let's just call it 1965. Okay. The Beach Boys came out with Help Me Rhonda, and the Rolling Stones came out with I Can't Get No Satisfaction. So that's how long the foam pad's been around. And I actually, at this moment, I don't know anybody else that still has one of these in the box that's never been used, even though this one never
will be used.
Can
be used is a better question.
There's some foam pad there. And what's interesting is when I started calling on body shops back in 1987, I would call on shops, and it's a strange thought for us nowadays, but I'd call on shops that all they'd ever buffed with was a wool pad. They
That's
never
kind
seen
of
a
what you
foam
always
pad.
see. Everybody thinks, oh,
Yeah.
we're buffing a car, get out a wool pad.
Well, it made it really easy to show guys how to leave better looking results when you switch them off of a fiber pad on the rotary buffer to a foam pad, because instantly you get away from one of the main culprits of hologram swirls, and that's the fibers. But that was, you know, that was a long time ago, but it was a unique experience that we'll never have a chance to relive again because we're so far down the road in the detailing world. But anyway, that's the first foam pad. And later that pad evolved. This is a later version of it. This is probably from the 1980s. This is one of the few I got left in my collection. I know Rod Kraft has a bunch of these, but back then they went ahead and glued the backing right on to the foam pad. So it was a one-use thing. And once that pad wore out, you just threw it away and you'd buy another pad. So then down the road, they started to add Velcro. Okay, so then you could attach the backing plate, and as the foam pad wore off, you could keep using the backing plate and just throw the foam pad away. So anyway, so that's kind of some of the history on early foam pads and how they evolved from backing plates to Velcro. Now, a lot of you out there don't use rotary buffers, you use orbitals, so there's a lot of great orbitals on the market, but I want to share with you where the foam pad and orbital polishing came from. And back, and I think it was in the late 1970s, it could be the early 1980s, but Meguiar's introduced this foam pad. It was a version of the big pad, and they also made this in a small version, okay? But it was this size, but they put a 5/16 threaded stud in the back of this thing.
Oh, you have it upside down.
Yeah, this was called the Soft Buff 6-inch dual action buffing pad. And if you were to read what these directions state, they state, because remember, Meguiar's trainers like myself, we were calling on body shops, detail shops, and dealerships. And at a body shop, it was really normal for the guys to have what's called a palm sander, knock down Bondo or do, knock down primer, use it for all kinds of things. And we would show them how they could take this backing plate off, and that's a 5/16 thread right there. And you could attach this foam pad from Meguiar's and turn
I wouldn't do that right now.
you could. I wouldn't do that. That's pretty old. You could turn your palm sander into a swirl remover. So that's kind of where that came from. But here's the more interesting thing. I'm going to leave this apart. Was somebody at Meguiar's, and also around that same time at Griot's Garage, they found this. This is a wood sander. A lot of people think this is a paint polisher. It started out as a wood sander. It's the Porter cable. This is the 7424 XP. The early versions are just called the 7424, and there's also the 7336. But both these early tools were wood sanders. But what somebody found out was this thing also used a 5/16 spindle, and you could attach this pad that they were selling for air tools in the body shop to an electric Porter cable, and that's the kind of the difference. Most people, enthusiasts and car owners, don't have an air compressor.
That can run one of those.
Yeah, because all air tools, by the way, are air hogs. But most people don't have a 60-gallon tank to feed something like this, but most people do have an electrical plug-in to plug this in. So they opened up this tool, and that pad opened up the world of professional quality results, swirl-free results, polishing at home for just the average person. Anybody that could afford $150 on average to buy a Porter cable, a couple of pads, they could be de-swirling cars at home. Anyway, that's kind of where this came from, and I kind of like to show that to people because a lot of the polishers that you're using today, whether it's in the Flex family, the Griot's family, the Meguiar's, the MT300, a lot of them have their basic design, or they stand on the shoulders of this lowly little wood sander.
And it still works.
And it still works great today. In fact, I always tell people you could buy one of these, drive over with the truck, pick it up, and keep on buffing. It's really well built. It's not the most powerful tool out there, but it is one of the better built tools out there.
And it's great for entry-level people, too.
Oh, gosh, it's a great tool. And since we're talking about a little bit of wax history, some of you watching this may remember this video. This is the first full-length DVD that shows you from start to finish how to detail a car. And a friend of mine, Richard Lynn, and I made this. We buffed out a 1960 tuxedo black Corvette, and the title of this was How to Use the PC for Show Car Results. And I actually did have people ask me, did I mean a computer, a personal computer to buff out a car?
Yep,
no, the
it.
PC, it meant Porter cable. That's the lingo. Okay, anyway, so just some of the history there. Moving along, I thought I'd share this because this is interesting. If you look at this wool pad, this is This is an early wool pad again from Meguiar's. Meguiar's really catered to the body shop and the
Mirror
OEM.
glaze.
You see all that?
Yep.
Okay, Yancy, what do you notice about the back of this?
It looks like canvas.
It is, and what's it missing compared to this?
Velcro.
Velcro. So guess how? Yeah,
that was a nut and a bolt that was that.
That's right. Back in the old days, before they, I guess, invented Velcro, the way they would hold this onto a rotary buffer.
Two washers and a bolt.
They had a nut. Here's how you take a backing plate off a rotary. Just whack it like that. But you would actually take and you'd have a spindle like this and you'd put this on and there'd be a nut with a flat side to it that would clamp down on there. And the theory being is you'd kept that auger, that spindle really small and that nylon or that bolt flat so there'd be enough wool around it that you wouldn't ever dig that into the paint. That's the theory.
All right, question. Did you ever did that?
If I did, I don't remember. Great answer, huh?
Safe answer. More like
I do have an article on that topic. Was whenever you burn through somebody's paint, you call that leaving your signature.
Is that what it was?
You flip it so it's a good thing. I left my signature on your car.
It's
anyway,
all over it, by the way.
That's how early pads work. Now, there was another style, and my friend down in New Zealand, Aaron, he sent me this. This is a really old...
Yeah, this is cool. You showed it to me in your office.
This thing is so heavy. This is
a
a RUPES
like
polisher. It's called a Type Vander. And I always have to wonder if Vander might mean sander.
Could be
in Italian, but this is a early RUPES, and it would be a multi-purpose tool, is my guess. So a grinder, sander, and a polisher. And the way this tool worked is it would have a hard backing plate on it. And back in the old days, you'd get these wool bonnets.
Yeah, you remember seeing that one in there, and it's actually the skin in there.
Oh yeah, this is real sheepskin. That's leather right there.
Yeah.
And it has a little drawstring here, so you'd pull this around the backing plate. And then you'd wrestle the string and tie it real tight and turn it on, and you're buffing. And that's early buffing technology. Bolted on pads, tied on pads, nothing like what you guys get to do today.
See, you guys have it so easy now.
Yeah, so easy.
Yeah, and Mike was there from the beginning.
Well, I was there for some of it, but not the beginning. Here's another little oddity, and sometimes I may just kind of go through these as I stumble across them, but you know, a lot of people, they think in the last couple of years, you've seen a couple companies come out with a foam pad that you could attach to a drill. This thing is from at least the 1980s. And one of the things Meguiar's found is when you're buffing with the drill, you need to bowl shape that pad to make it easy to control. But this is just one of the few odd things I still have in my antique. I call it my antique wax collection, but it includes a lot of different types of things in it.
His office is a museum.
It's a mess is what it is.
Well, I was being nice.
So anyway, so some early technology there. Of course, over here we have what I always call a TOB, a traditional orbital buffer. Some people would call this the steering wheel buffer because it looks like the steering wheel.
I think every DIYer, they're like, oh, I'm at the parts store, and oh, look, there's a polisher. I can polish out my paint with that.
$25 and you're buffing. They usually have a on-off speed. There's no variable speed to it. They usually have a large bonnet. And then the way these things worked is they got a big foam backing or padding on the backing plate, and then you swap out to different bonnets depending on what you're trying to do. And I've been answering questions about this for so long that I'm going to go ahead and just kind of cover it, because back in the early days when I used to teach a lot of classes in Irvine at Meguiar's, you'd have a car club come down, have 25, 30 people there. You'd explain to them how to use, back then it'd be the Porter cable. It had a Meguiar's badge on it. So it was the Meguiar's G100, but it was basically just a Porter cable. And after you'd go through all this, there'd be some guy in the audience that say, hey, Mike, I don't have one of those, but I got one of these. Can I do the same thing? And then I'd explain to them in a real nice way that the answer is no. And here's why. Those things came out at the time when the cars were being painted with single stage paint, what are called solvent evaporation lacquers, solvent evaporation enamels. And over the years, paints like this, if they weren't taken care of, they would oxidize. They'd actually turn chalky. You could actually have a blue car turn chalky white with oxidation. No problem with a tool like this because that paint was softer, those panels were bigger, and you could throw a compound on there and set it down on an oxidized hood and it would kind of chew through that paint and leave a shiny base. So or you could spread a wax out. But back then, with them old single stage paints that were softer and the main problem was oxidation, these tools worked pretty good. Fast forward to 1980, the first American-made car to come out with the base coat clear coat was the Corvette. And even though that early clear coat technology was on the soft side, everybody knows paints have changed a lot. And generally speaking, just generally speaking, modern clear coats are harder than old style single stage lacquers and enamels. And so while this worked on the old style paints, it doesn't work on new clear coats. So now you need something usually with a smaller pad and a different
Higher
type
RPM,
of oscillation motion, and usually higher speeds. And of course, greater bracelet technology and pad technology. So anyway, that's just kind of touch bases on the old TOB, the traditional orbital buffer. Okay, so now let's look at some of the pads here. And I printed out and I typed up kind of
going to the history. Let me pull that up.
The history of pad. You got that on the screen?
I have the graphic, and it's coming up right now.
And I printed this out because I didn't want to try to memorize this. And if I have any experts on pad history, for example, if someone from Buff and Shine or from Lake Country is watching this and they go, Mike, you got that wrong. I didn't mean to. I try to get as accurate as I could from mostly memory or articles I've written. But in 1965, we had the first foam pad. In the 1970s or 80s, they introduced the soft buffed version of this and the one for the DA, the palm sander in the body shop. And actually, in the 1980s, I'm probably the only guy that has these. I dug these out. In the 1980s, Meguiar's launched their professional detailers line. It was 5 different products in gallon jugs only, and with that line, they introduced 3 different pads. They introduced the yellow polishing pad as the same pad they had out, but that would be your in the middle, polishing. Then they also introduced this foam cutting pad. And it used to be a very beautiful pink, and now, as you can tell, it's just aging. And this, again, you can feel it. It has a sharpness to it. But this was one of the early foam cutting pads. In fact, it may be the first foam cutting pad that was ever made. And it's funny, is the backing has come off. Here's the backing there. It says right on there, W7000. I'll hold that up for you. Okay. Cutting.
Wow.
Okay. So they brought this one out. They had the yellow pad. And then, of course, to round out the system, this is going to look bad, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it out of this bag. This thing is just falling apart. And because this was the only one I had, and I used it probably with some old Meguiar's number 9 or something. And this foam is just literally falling apart. This at one time was tan, and this was the foam finishing pad.
Yeah, just be careful. You don't want to break it all apart.
So they had a 3-pad system. They had cutting, polishing, and finishing.
That's what foam looks like after it makes years.
And look how thick they are, too. Okay? So early pads were very thick and large. Okay, I'm going to just set this over here. And I'll probably take some pictures of it and then throw it away because I've been packing it around for 20 years now. 20-year-old foam there, 30-year-old foam there. Anyway, a lot of you guys have probably never seen these before. These are vintage foam pads.
Because you're a vintage type of guy.
It's good to not have to relearn everything, put it that way. Okay, so going down my list here, so that was then. And then there was probably a lot of different pad advancements that, that I'm not going to document. But if we go up to 2007, Lake Country filed a patent for what they call CCS foam. And I got one of these back here. And millions of people have used these. I think they've used these at the OEM level. CCS stands for collapsed cell structure. And they have these little divots that look like they were melted in there. And what they do is they kind of hold some product and release it as you're buffing. They make the buffing smoother. They extend the buffing cycle of whatever the product you're using. So that was just a major advancement. And of course, since then, you've probably seen a lot of pads come out with designs in them. But I think Lake Country was one of the first to really come up with this idea. So that was 2007. 2010, now this is interesting because I want to show you this. Look how thick this pad is. And in 2010, Lake Country introduced what they call the Hydrotech line.
Can you put a comparison of the two?
And I will. Here's what makes this different. Look how thin that pad is to that pad. It's about half as thick. And here's where this is important. Until that pad came out, all other foam pads on the market were all about this thick, real thick. And at that time, one of the most common polishers on the market was either the Porter cable or copies of the Porter cable. And the Porter cable, as you all know, has this what's called a free-floating spindle bearing design. This thing is free spinning, it's not gear driven. It gets its power from the counterweight. When you turn this on, this counterweight gets a spin and you take it up to high speed, it builds inertia and it helps to maintain pad rotation, surely from inertia. But if you hold it crooked or push down too hard, the pad would stop spinning. Now, when you put a thick pad on there, the foam, all that foam would absorb the energy coming out of the tool and dissipate it. And that would show up to your eyes as the pad isn't spinning. So when Lake Country brought out these thinner pads, less foam, better pad rotation. So that was a huge improvement in the different pad options that we all had to choose from back then. And you got to keep in mind, this was before the RUPES, the Boss system polishers, a lot of these cool tools that everybody's using, they weren't even invented then. Everybody was using something that looked kind of like this. It was either this or a knockoff of this. So the pad thickness was a key thing to getting the swirls and cars out. And by going to that thin pad, it helped us all to get the job done better and faster. But they weren't through there. So let's go down here to 2011. Meguiar's introduces the first microfiber DA correction system.
I remember them being here.
We shot a video out here with them. So here's their current version of these pads. This is called the extra cut, and look how thin that is.
That is thin.
And let's go back to what I was just saying. With no foam interface, no foam to rob the power coming out of a free spinning tool, you put this on a backing plate and it's going to spin like a son of a gun. In fact, these early wood sanders, if you think about it, the sanding disc was really thin.
Which is like a little bit, 5 sheets of paper.
Yeah, it's like 5 sheets of paper, just real thin. So this had no problem maintaining pad oscillation and pad rotation. Same thing would apply to this. There's no substance here to absorb the power and dissipate it. Then they've got a foam cutting pad. That's the maroon one, and then they got a foam polishing microfiber pad, black. And this is, you can tell that they go up
slightly more.
Yeah, slightly, a little bit thicker.
So they're basically taking some of the action away from the edge or the microfiber.
They're basically robbing the tool to decrease the cut.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about why they brought out. This is what most people don't know. Why did they bring out microfiber pads? And I always see a lot of confusion on this, so I've written a couple articles on this, and I can explain this really easily. What Meguiar's wanted to do, and it was actually very noble on their part, so much of the detailing done in the commercial industry, so at dealerships, body shops, detail shops, and at auction sites, was being done with a wool pad on a rotary buffer. In fact, let me grab one of these and show you. So it's a very visual thing. And there's a lot of reasons for this. So here's a traditional wool pad. Here's your DeWalt 849X, big powerful buffer. You can buff with this thing for decades and it won't ever wear out. And you could buy one wool pad and buff out thousands of cars with this. So not only was it cheap, but it was durable. The problem is whenever you buff with a rotary buffer spins in a single direction, each one of these fibers.
You like plucking those things.
Each one of these fibers, can you get that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Put a cut in the paint. Millions of fibers, millions of cuts, and we call those holograms. I like to get more specific and call them hologram scratches because technically that's what they are. They're a scratch pattern that is mimicked by the direction you move the rotary over the paint. It looks like they're kind of floating or have a 3D or a hologram effect, and that's where they get their name, holograms. So what Meguiar's wanted to do was they wanted to find a way for the technicians in the industry to get the defects out of the paint quickly like a rotary, but get away from the rotary. So they went to the free spinning DA. And but when they went to this tool, it's obviously a lot less powerful. So then the question is, well, how can we get more cut out of a weaker tool? And the answer to that is they went to a fiber pad instead of foam. So here's a brand new backing plate. And whenever you have one of these, a lot of times they have what's called a compression washer. Don't lose the compression washer. Sometimes they'll just fall off as you're putting the backing plate. They'll drop off. And what you'll do then is you'll have metal to metal contact. In fact, if you look right here, you can see someone's assembled this one together and you can see where it's scarred the counterweight. Whoops. And usually when I'm out here, if someone's done that, I'll hear it because it'll be loud and generally it'll heat. It'll melt your backing plate. So always make sure that when you go to assemble these, you have the compression washer. And what this is, it's a crushable interface to prevent metal to metal contact. And of course they do wear out because they crush when you tighten them down. And if you ever go to assemble these, you got the counterweight here and you got your PC wrench coming from the opposite side. Otherwise, you're going to sandwich your wrench between the counterweight and the backing plate. It'd be hard to get it off there. So I use my thumb to kind of, just like here, I'll show you. I always use my thumb to kind of hold that in place, line it up, put it on there and spin it. Just like that. And then just kind of snug it down. You don't got to be the Hulk when you tighten that down.
Yeah, you want to get it back off.
You want to be able to get it back off. Okay, so anyway, then while I'm here, here's a tip. We're always showing people simple things like this. Take a Sharpie and at least put one mark on there. And the reason why is because when you turn this thing up to high speed, that yellow backing plate is just going to be a blur. It's going to be hard to monitor pad rotation. You put a mark on there, it's kind of like a timing light if you've ever timed a car. Now your eyes can see either the pad's rotating or it's not. If it's not, then you can stop and try to figure out what's going on.
If you see the line, that means if it's staying in one spot, you are not rotating.
You're not doing anything. You're wasting your time. That's true for about any free spinning polisher out there. They're supposed to rotate and oscillate, but you want both actions. Otherwise, you're just not going to be really effective with your time. So help me get back to where I was going. Microfiber pads versus foam.
Right.
Okay, so to get guys off the Rotary, the powerful Rotary, which would get a car buffed out quickly, but leave holograms in it, now you got unhappy customers. Look at the car in the sun, looks horrible. They came up with a microfiber pad system. So by creating these microscopic fibers on a pad that fit onto a DA, they increased the cutting action of the weaker tool, which enabled technicians to go ahead and get the defects removed quicker, never as fast as this, but quicker with higher quality results. And a lot of this push that they did meant educating, and that's really hard to do. You know, everybody, it's hard to change an industry once it's kind of set in its ways. So you really have to hand it to Meguiar's for launching this system. Of course, they had dedicated compounds and polishes to go with these microfiber pads, but that's really what this system was about, was to get the industry off of rotaries, off to a safe DA, to get rid of the swirl problems, happier customers, and less work and fatigue on the technicians also, and also better for the paint. You're not.
That was about what I was going to say. Wouldn't that be better for the paint too? Because you're not removing as much.
Not heating it up, not burning through it, not leaving swirls. You know, when you leave a swirled out finish, for example, if I swirled out the hood, you know, that hood has a given surface area. Scratches would look like this. You know, you just have hills and valleys, and that would probably make the surface area 2 to 3 times as big. So it's going to corrode or oxidize even faster. A long time ago, Dr. David Gadusi told me a smooth surface will last longer than a textured surface. I thought, wow, that makes sense. So that's why if you buff with something like this and stop, you're going to have a textured surface. It might look smooth, but at a microscopic level, you're going to have thousands and thousands of voids in the paint from the scratches the fibers put in. Anyway, that's where that came from. Now, here's the other part that most people don't know. When they were creating the system, they weren't really creating it to be a show car polishing system. It was a production system. Get the paint looking good. Not perfect, but probably good. And the reason why, and this is another topic of interest, is because anytime you're buffing with fibers, the fibers are cutting the paint. They're leaving a cut in the paint. That's why they created this system, to cut the paint faster without using a rotary action. The problem is with the DA, that cutting is not called holograms, it's called micromarring. So the system wasn't really designed to put the best finish on the car. It was designed to put a really good finish on the car and get the car pumped out without all the defects of a rotary. Now, as time has progressed, of course, the microfiber technologies increased. There's multiple players on the market. The chemicals that we use, different manufacturers, RUPES, Griots, Meguiar's, you know, a lot of companies have their own optimum polymer technologies. They have compounds that are specifically formulated to use with microfiber. And really what it comes down to is you can use a microfiber system and finish out really nice on your harder paints. But as soon as you get into softer paints, the fibers are going to tend to leave that scratch so easily that it's going to show up to your eye. It's going to dull the paint. It's going to haze the paint. So that kind of leads me back to one of the things I always tell people. It's a line I speak or type out. It goes like this. A foam pad will leave a nicer looking finish more consistently over a wider spectrum of paint finishes than a fiber pad. That's a true statement. It doesn't mean you can't get great results with a fiber pad, but over the widest spectrum of paints, super hard paints, super soft paints, foam's usually going to finish out nicer. And a good practice is of course, always do a test spot. So every time you're working on a car, if you're thinking you want to use a microfiber. You know, here's the RUPES microfiber, here's the Buff and Shine, here's the Meguiars. You know, there's so many microfiber options out there. If you're a microfiber system guy and you want to use microfiber, that's fine, but do your test spot. Do the whole process all the way to the end, then inspect that paint. And it's always a good idea to chemically strip it and throw a swirl finder light on it and make sure the results you get are the results you hope and dream about, that it looks just like you want it to look. And if you see any kind of micro marking, all you've got to do is go ahead and start with microfiber, but finish with foam.
I got something for you. Now with the microfiber, since we're talking about microfibers, can't you vary the cut and everything? You having problems with your cord?
My wire's falling off. Yeah.
Can't you vary the cut with the different compounds and stuff?
You
could have
can.
one pad, but you could have either.
Yeah, that's the benefit to it. You can vary it by the same thing with the foam pad. You can vary the cut by changing the chemical. But the thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. That is a great way to segue into this. The difference, let me grab something that you can capture. Can you capture these two, fiber and foam? Here's the difference, and here's something no one ever points out.
All right.
Okay, so with this, you've got thousands of fibers cutting the paint, spinning, oscillating. With this, uniform surface texture. That's why this will finish out more consistently on a wider spectrum of paints than a fiber pad. And you know, most people know I'm not a big microfiber guy. I can do anything I want to do with a foam pad, and if I have to do heavy cutting, I switch over to a rotary with the traditional wool or one of the new micro wools. I don't like the feel of taking I don't like the time it takes, and I don't like the feel it takes to use microfiber pads on orbital polishes. That's just my preference, you know. And like this 57 when we started out, I'm using a powerful gear-driven tool, the orange foam cutting pad. I dialed in my test spot. I found out that 8 section passes removed the defects to my satisfaction, and boom, I'm done. Once I do the 8, I move on to the another section, and it's going to come out exactly like I want it to look. I don't need to go to something more aggressive in the way of a fiber pad when I can get it done with the foam pad, and I like the feel of it better. That, you know, when you've got a nice thick foam cutting pad like this, it's got a contour over curves, so it's going to smooth out the buffing action for you.
Okay, another one for you. Now, would it be like an industry trend or like something that people do, that they'll use a microfiber for the cutting step, then they'll come back with foam to clean that all up?
It's a great combination.
All right.
It's not my combination, but a lot of guys can do that. And here's another little tidbit: the microfiber pad. And I'm going to go by memory here, but there's a gentleman, and I hope he's watching this. His name is Claude Sauvigny. And a lot of the real pro detailers in the world, they all know that name. He is probably one of the best detailers that was ever lived. He's one of the smartest detailers when it comes to just knowing everything between the science of a mechanical action in paint and creating beauty. And it was Claude Sauvigny that invented the microfiber pad. It was originally used at the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer. That means the Ford assembly line, the GM assembly line. It was a pad that was made for what they call a polishing deck. So if the car is painted, you have a quality control person, they would locate and find any kind of defects in the paint, mark with the grease pencil, they pull that car off to the side, someone would be there to usually sand it, little small pad, sand it down, another guy's gonna polish it out, and they're gonna get that thing back on the assembly line as fast as they can. And instead of doing a multiple system process with different pads and chemicals, they'd have one chemical and a microfiber pad. Right. And it'd get it good enough to go, yeah, good enough, get that thing out the door. We got an assembly line running.
Yeah, we don't hold up the show here.
We're producing cars on scale. But that's the history of it. And that probably dates back to, I'm going to take a guess, sometime in the early 2000s. I have a car that I detailed and documented in 2006 when I was using the OEM microfiber pads, and that would be 5 years before this was introduced to the public, when the Meguiars came out here and we shot that video with them.
Yeah, it was Jason.
So for anybody that thinks, well, Mike, you just haven't spent time with microfiber pads, that's why you don't like them. No, I've probably spent more time with them than most people.
It just isn't,
you know,
something that you like.
Just a personal preference.
Personal preference, people.
Okay.
Back to the history.
Okay, so we've covered, back to the history. So
we're on 2012.
Okay, so 2012, Lake Country introduces the Ultra-Fiber Microfiber pads. Now, the only one I got left, because this is a few years ago, is a little 2-inch one here.
Oh, God.
See how the fibers
Hold on, let me
yellow?
get my macro lens in here.
These came in 5.5 and 6.5,
okay.
and they actually had one that had a really thick foam interface, probably about as thick as this, and they made that one for the rotary buffer. But it just never worked that good because it generated a lot of heat, and anything you're gonna do with that, you could just do with a normal wool pad. Yeah, but that would be, you know, they're kind of taking their cue from Meguiar's. I always hate to say the word copy, but They looked at what Meguiar's was doing. Of course, they're a pad manufacturer, and they launched their own line. Okay, so then we go to 2013, RUPES. RUPES introduced their blue and yellow microfiber pads. I remember I was at SEMA when these came out. And the yellow is a polishing, the blue is a cutting pad, and they got these ventilation curvature slots in the back to keep the pads cool, because fiber pads do tend to create more heat than a foam pad. That was their first entry-level microfiber pads, and those came in, I think they came in 4-inch and 5.5-inch and 6.5-inch, or whatever the metric versions of that would be. Then 2013, Meguiar's introduced an updated DA correction system, and that's actually the system I have here. I do not have any of the original ones from 2011.
You can look on our YouTube channel. We have that video on there.
And then Meguiar's introduced their thin foam buffing pads. They're right here. Now, this was another improvement in thin foam technology. So again, let me move this out of the way here. Let's go back. Originally,
we're seeing a theme here.
Yeah. Originally, all the pads were at least this thick. I mean, I'm not going to name names, but all the big pad manufacturers, every film pad they had out was at least this thick, 1.25 inches thick. Okay, so then in 2010, let me just put this down here. One. Lake Country introduced the Hydrotech, that's 7/8 of an inch, and then Meguiar's introduced their thin, they call them discs, because it's not so much a pad now. And that was in 2014, foam buffing discs, and these are 11/16 or 17.5 millimeters. So compared to this, look how thin that pad is. And what that means,
that's like 3 pads in one.
It's like 3 pads. Well, that means on a tool like this, a free spinning tool like this, it's going to spin like a son of a gun. And that's what we need. We need the pad Rotary to do correction work.
I think that they started realizing that the more power is always better.
Well, just taking advantage of the power that's available.
Well, that's even better words.
Okay, so then that was 2014. Then 2015, Griot's Garage introduces their Boss microfiber pads and thin foam discs, and I have those right here. And what year was that? 2015. So here's their foam cutting disc, and like Meguiar's, look, there's no foam backing. It's just the microfiber and the Velcro, very thin. So this would be very aggressive. They had a foam or microfiber polishing pad. Here you can see the foam interface. So again, that's
taking some of the power out.
It's gonna make it less aggressive. And then they introduced their Boss pads. I only got 3 of them. They have a yellow one here. But look how thin these are.
How thin are those compared to the Meguiar's?
They're just like the Meguiar's and the Thin Pro, which we're getting to. So here is a
Meguiar's.
Let me get an orange one down here.
Griot's.
Same thickness. I'd say, in fact, this is just a little bit thinner.
Yeah, it looks a little bit thinner.
Just a tick thinner. But again, there's that theory of thin. Now, also, what do you notice about this pad and this pad? What makes them different?
It has a hole in the middle.
It's got a hole in the middle. Now, does anybody out there know what benefit the hole in the middle might have?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, you can answer, Nancy.
Or cooling.
Cooling, exactly. On tools like this, remember when I had this apart, I showed the spindle was in the center? Most of the heat generating the tool starts at the spindle and migrates out. And when you have a piece of foam there, it has no choice but to go into the foam.
And plus, that's where the metal's at. So that's what conducts
So it goes
heat.
into the Velcro, it goes into the adhesive, and it goes into the foam. And you see the foam start to bowl out. The heat just destroys, especially if you're the guy that only has one foam cutting pad and you're trying to buff out an entire car. You're going to punish or torture that pad.
There was a viewer that he said it. Ivan Campuzano. Sorry about that. Better cooling is what he said.
Better cooling. So when you put a hole there, now the heat goes into the air. So it lengthens the longevity of the pad just by a simple hole there. You're paying for less foam, but you're getting a longer lasting pad out of it. Okay, so that was the Griot's Garage entry into the foam pad. I'm going to keep these up here because we're going to talk about one more that's going to go right along with that. So then 2016, Lake Country introduces their 2nd generation microfiber pads. I think I have one here. This was their foam polishing, microfiber polishing pad. You can tell by the blue interface there. And they've upgraded their pads since then, so I don't think these are even available anymore. And so that's good. It's an evolution always taking place, getting better and better pads for us to use. Okay, then in 2017, or 2016, Buff and Shine introduces their Eurofiber pads.
That was, as I think Justin said the other day in the video, the cookies and cream pad.
Yes. Actually, I think they had A black, yeah, they just had this, they call it Oreo cookies or cookie and cream, the salt and pepper look.
Yeah.
Okay, and these were a great pad too, cutting and polishing. And then in 2017, Lake Country introduced what's called the Thin Pro. And they introduced these in 3.5, 5.5, and 6.5. And I'm gonna put down, let's see, I don't know, here's their gray one, really stiff. So now you've got 3 super thin foam pads, the Meguiar's, the Griot's Boss, the Lake Country Thin Pro, all super thin, all rotate exceptionally well out of even the weakest 8mm free spinning random orbital polishers. And this line here actually came with this very, you can hear this, listen.
Looks like sandpaper.
It's sharp. I've only used this pad a couple times in my life because it's so hard and so sharp.
It's like, ah!
And of course they got the grays extreme cutting, then the orange cutting, white polishing, black finishing, and red waxing.
I'm glad you're there. There needs, well, I think everybody says that there needs to be a color theory across everywhere.
Yes.
Like you just went down Lake Countries, they have a different color than Buff and Shine. And everybody. No,
there's never going to be
do you know why there was never a uniform?
I'll tell you why. But let me go another, well, I'm almost done through the history. Then in 2017, RUPES introduced the Millet, their 5mm gear-driven orbital polisher. Notice I never use the word random when I talk about a gear-driven. When you have a gear-driven orbital polisher, there's no random pattern. It's a fixed position or a fixed pattern. But they introduced the Millet, and to go with the Millet, they introduced 3 different yellow pads, and look how thin these are.
I've never used those. Do you like those ones?
Yeah, they work great on their tools. You know, I tend to be a systems guy, so I'm not always the best guy to ask, hey, does this really work good on this guy's tool? I don't know. When I use that, it's because I'm using a RUPES tool with the RUPES chemical. But yeah, super thin pads. And then they also launched their microfiber pad systems to go with them. A new microfiber style, a pile length. They still got the vented slots in the back. The yellow is finishing, the blue, you see the texture is the cutting. So again, always innovating, bringing out.
And their stuff is all color coded. The chemicals, the pads, everything's all.
That's one of the things about theirs. They do color code their caps to their products. Now, let me talk about the subject of the colors of pads. I know everybody wishes there was a uniform color code, a universal, worldwide color code. There never has been. There never will be, unless we start taxing all this stuff and come up with a world police, car wax police system.
You got nothing to do, right?
Yeah, I got nothing to do. So there never has been. And what's funny is if you look at this here, this is a foam cutting pad in the Lake Country line. This is their Cyan Hydrotech foam cutting pad. Now they've discontinued it, but they used to have a light blue soft foam waxing pad.
Yep,
so even the same, so even one company doesn't even follow their own color coding. It's just kind of like whatever the flavor of the month is, they come out with a new pad.
So, Joe, what color do you want to do today?
In my how-to books, what I've always said is if you're going to get into machine polishing, at some point it's your responsibility to, once you figure out the tool you're going to use, to go do some studying. The information's out there on the interwebs, and figure out the color coding for the pads you're going to use. But here's one simple thing you can always do. You can always take a dry pad and just take your hand and run it over the face, and a foam cutting pad. It will be stiffer. It'll have a sharpness to it. Here's the cyan or the magenta.
Magenta?
Magenta.
No, magenta.
Magenta. I knew
magenta.
And you feel this, it's much softer. It's easier to compress. So you can use some real basic tests to kind of tell what a pad is.
Okay. Since we're on that, and I know from watching you in your classes and everything like that, you always have people feel them. Then you also have people blow into them. What are you making them do by blowing into them?
Good point. So there's what's called closed cell and open cell. Now, a great example of an open cell is the RUPES coarse blue pad. I can take and blow into it very easily, and it's because it's an open cell. If I take this blue pad, that's called the Hydrotech, which means water tech or water technology. This is closed cell, and I cannot blow air into it. And you can also kind of see, if you look at these, well, this is kind of a bad example, but see how this has, like, it's kind of shiny? See how these Hydrotechs have a little bit of a shine to them?
Yeah, kind of a little sparkle.
A little glisten there?
Yeah.
Okay, so what that is, and here's, I love this analogy. I think it was my friend Eric Dunn that explained this to me. And Eric used to work for Lake Country. Now he's over there with Hybrid Solutions and the Wax Shop. Real smart guy in Pazzo, but imagine, and we'll just use the cars since we got it here. this would be representative of closed cell. So this frame here is the cell wall structure, and the glass is the membrane. So this would be closed cell. Now, after they make the foam, they have it in this chamber where they create an explosion in there. This explosion runs through the foam and it blows out all the windows. So now you have the frame, but the membranes are blown out, and that's like open cell. And the theory being, when you take a closed cell pad like this, the theory being, because it's got the membrane intact, liquids can't get into it. Therefore, it'll keep the liquid trapped between the pad and the paint, and that's where you want it. You'll get more
less saturation.
You'll get less pad saturation, more use out of the product. The problem is we go back to all these tools that are orbitals. When you crank them up, that action is violent, and it's going to vibrate that liquid right up into that foam pad. So it doesn't really work like you think it would. It's still
because the action kind of starts blowing the windows out, as you say.
No, it doesn't break the pad down. Okay. It just gets the liquid past them. It still gets, the pad still gets wet. Now, here's the problem with that is now it's going to be hard to get it out. So when you go to wash it, it's going to be harder to get out because it's close. It's open. It's closed cell. The other thing is when you have a close cell. This is starting to go deep on everybody. There's a term. I
think they get used to that in these videos.
Okay, so there's a term called tensile strength, and a closed cell pad has less tensile strength. What that means is this is going to tear. Oh wow!
Did you just tear that off?
Yeah, this is going to tear instead of stretch. Oops.
There it is. There's that little piece.
So these pads, that's why they don't last very long. They just break down because the characteristics of them people love for the way they cut or finish, but they're never going to last as long as an open cell, which has more tensile strength. Let me take a open cell pad here and show you that. So here's an open cell. I can blow through it, and when I do the same thing, it'll tend to stretch before it'll rip. So it has higher.
That's even a softer foam too.
Yeah, soft. Well, but anyway, you have the cutting pad too. Just open cell has higher tensile strength than closed cell. Therefore, open cell lasts longer. And you know when I'm trying to help people pick pads, you know, I don't want to pit any brand or type of pad against each other, but usually I will share that little tidbit of information with newbies because, of course, when you're getting the machine polishing, that's a lot of expense. You're buying a tool, you're buying chemicals, you're buying pads, and I want to make sure that they're going to have a great experience.
They'll be happy with it, yeah.
And then down the road, they can experiment and try other types of pads. So I got a couple other notes here we'll kind of touch on real quickly. Let me just go through. I talked about this foam pads. Fibers are a form of abrasive. Always remember that.
Yeah, I posted your link on the comments here.
You increase the cut when you go from a foam to fiber because instead of having a uniform surface texture, now you have individual fibers cutting the paint. Good rule of thumb when using an AIO. Okay, so a pad in and of itself, let me go back to this. I use these pads a lot with my AIO. So this has a sharpness to it. Now, this would not mar a very hard paint, but if you're buffing a car with softer paint, the pad by itself will scratch or mar the paint. So a good rule of thumb when you're doing a one-step detail to somebody's car is to try to stick with polishing pads. Not finishing, not cutting, but right in that sweet spot, the polishing pad. And I'm going to go deep on you here again, okay? If you're doing this for money, first of all, if you're detailing for money, if you're new to this, you probably don't know this, but you need to have different packages, okay? You need to have a package for the guy that, hey, I just want my car cleaned up, okay? I always like to pick on Honda, okay? I've had a Honda four-door Accord, great car, but it's not a 69 GTO. You know, it's a commuter car. And the guy that owns that, he probably doesn't want a multi-step show car detail, especially if it's 5, 10 years old. He just wants it cleaned up. You need to have a package for that guy. It's a lower price point. You're gonna do less work, okay? Then you should have a medium package and a high-end package. So the guy comes to you with the brand new Ferrari or Corvette, wants a ceramic coating, you've got a package for that. But you're gonna put more time, more chemicals, more pads, more resources, more energy into it. It's gonna be at a higher price point. Let your customers pick with their budget and the kind of car they have, the package that suits them best. But for your entry-level consumer, you need to have a great what I call package one. Now you could call this gold star, silver star, bronze star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. You can give them flowery marketing names. I keep it simple. Package one, package two. You never make your customer work at trying to figure out what you're going to charge them. Okay, that's not their job. But have package one. Package one should be a simple AIO, all in one, a one-step
In and
cleaner
done.
wax, okay? I use Blackfire one-step. 3D Speed is another one. Meguiar's, was it D166 polishing wax? But something that's gonna correct the paint, polish it, and leave it protected one step. And when you're using these types of products and you're targeting that customer, you shouldn't be using a foam cutting pad. You should be trying to stay in that sweet spot of a foam polishing pad, because first of all, you never promised to remove all the swirls and scratches. That's your package 2 or 3. So you should always under-promise and over-deliver. But here's what's going to happen. If you get a car that's got soft paint and you don't do a proper test spot and you buff it out with a foam cutting pad, you wipe it down and look at it and see marring. Now you're buffing it out a second time to pull the marring out. So your one step just become a 2-step. You're losing money. So you have to look at how all these different parts kind of work together when you're running a business. And what you don't want to do is get yourself in a situation where oh, God, I got to buff the car out a second time. It's a time killer. You'll be working for peanuts. So
yeah, you're in this business to make money.
So try to stick with the foam polishing pad. Now, that said, I've got enough experience, and as well as a lot of other guys do, that they can do their test spot and they can determine that paint is hard, and they're going to get better correction with a foam cutting pad with their one-step, their AIO. And some guys might even use a microfiber pad with their one-step if that paint is really hard. But it all comes down to the first thing you should be doing every time you buff out a car is a proper test spot. You want to dial in your process to one section and make sure you're getting the exact results you want for the rest of the car before you buff out the rest of the car. And then you won't have a whoops, I gotta buff out the car again. Damn it. Okay, so it's just important if you don't understand the concept of having packages to match your customers. Micromarine, I think I covered that. Yeah. Production detailing, I think I covered that. I think I got everything I wanted to cover. I would just say though, back in the old days, if we go back to this very ancient RUPES Vander, what do they call this thing? Type Vander. This thing, I'm gonna guess, weighs about 20 pounds. And
you turned a little
this
red
one
in the
weighs
face.
about 5 ounces. Okay, so we've seen a lot of improvement over tool technology. This, by the way, I call this my angry nano. It's got a little face on it. He gets in there and he gets the job done.
Oh, wait a minute. No, I know you have a special pad for that. That is it's your one and only pad. Do you not have that still?
This one?
Yeah, that pad for it.
Sorry, but the backing plate won't fit. I could use that on the Pixie though. But yeah, this is kind of a joke Lake Country made a bunch of us a couple years ago. But tool technology has come so far, but along with tool technology, you need different pads. And here's the good news here at Autogeek, we probably carry the widest selection of both fiber and foam buffing
Oh, we got pads, people.
We got so many pads. So whatever your pad needs might be, you can go to Autogeek. You can go to the Detailing 101 Facebook group. If you're unsure what pad to get, ask there. I usually answer questions on the forum. You can ask me there. We'll help you get the right pads for your buffing needs. But the one thing you got to remember, when you're starting to stock up on all the things you're going to need because you want to buff out your car this Saturday, don't forget to have extra pads.
Now, along those lines, let me bring me back up so that way I'm not just
talking about cleaning pads.
That's where I was getting at.
Okay.
Because I know that a lot of people are like, oh, I get one pad and I can get a cleaner and I can just clean my pad on the fly and while I'm sitting there going, yeah, you can, but it's not so much, right?
You can, and if that's all you got, then that's what you do. There's a technique when it comes to a simple DA called cleaning your pad on the fly, and that's where you use a microfiber towel or a terry cloth towel and
I
basically,
think we have a video with you doing it at terry
yeah, there's
cloth.
a couple of videos out there floating around. You'll just hold that towel, shove it against there, and turn it on, and kind of just push that against there. And pushing it will cause the liquid to move out of the pad into the towel, plus scrape off some of the gunk on the pad. And then you can go back to work. But the problem is even though you cleaned it a little, it's still wet.
Correct.
And dry pads buff and cut and do everything they're supposed to do so much better than a wet, soggy, saturated pad. And that's the only downside to foam is it becomes wet and soggy. It quits doing what it was intended to do. Microfiber pad gets wet, the fibers are still going to cut that paint.
Then you just blow them out. I remember the first car that I did when I started working, I think it was 18 years ago.
Let's talk about how often to clean your pad. So as you're working around the car.
I was going to say something, but okay.
As you're working on the car, so here's an example. I buffed out one half of this 57 Chevy here, or as I like to call this old two-door Ford. In the real world, the best practice would be after you buff out a section, take a nylon brush and just scrape off the gunk. Okay, so now follow me. Anytime you're abrading the paint, okay, so you're using a compound, a polish, or an AIO, you have paint coming off the car. and it's building up on the face of the pad. Now think about this. If I buff out a section on the hood, don't I have to take a towel and wipe that gunk off?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that gunk's on the face of the pad. It's the same.
Yeah, it didn't magically disappear.
Yes, it's just right there, so you've got to take it off. And what you have on the face of the pad are two things that build up. You have spent product, okay, so whatever your compound polish or cleaner wax is, as you're doing your buffing, your section passes, and cycling that product, it's becoming worn out. Theoretically, it's becoming worn out. I know that you can make an argument for SMAT products don't ever wear out, but just theoretically, it's spent, it's used up. You also abraded the paint. So even the clear coat, you might not see because it's clear, but it's on the face of the pad. So if you don't clean it off and you go to add fresh product, now you're going to watch this because I'm a rapper. You're going to pollute it and to dilute it. Okay?
Oh, God.
So if I put this on a dirty pad, this fresh product is going to mix with the old product. It's going to dilute it, its cleaning or abrading ability. It's going to pollute it. You just put pristine, clean product with dirty, icky product. And the resulting residue that's left on the paint is going to be stickier or gummier to wipe off, and that's going to tire you out. So in a perfect world, you would clean your pad after each section pass. And if you got that kind of time, go for it. I usually do every other section. I go ahead and just hit the
section or section pass?
Every other section I buff out.
Okay.
So I'll buff a section, clean my pad, buff a section, clean my pad. Okay. And by then I'm usually ready to swap out to another pad anyway.
Okay.
So that's one thing you can do. Now, and if you don't have a fancy, this is called a pad conditioning brush. You could use, this is Yancy's toothbrush.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Sure. I brought it in just for this video.
Now, here's a pad washer. There's a couple of these on the market. This is the one by my good friends, Doug Lamb and his wife and kids over there at Griot. And these things work great for cleaning pads, but really, they're the kind of thing you want to use at the end of the day. You don't want to take the one pad that you got, and clean it, put it back on your buffer, because theoretically,
well,
when
explain
you're done,
what it is.
Yeah.
Somebody might not know what that is.
Oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I know all this stuff. Okay, so this is a pad washer. Let me show you how this works. First, you take out the grit guard insert. Okay, and this has a small grit guard insert on the top of it that you can move around to put pressure on different parts of the pad. And then on the inside of this thing are what are called water pumps. Now, see the little hole here in this plastic cup, and there's a stainless steel spring in there, stainless steel so it won't rust. And there's 4 of these, and they sit on what's called the vortex base. The vortex base, I love that name. And then it's got these little rubber feedy things. Don't lose these, because these are what keeps this thing from spinning in a circle in the bucket when you turn your polisher on and spin the pad in a circle against the grit guard insert. And then of course you fill this full of a pad cleaning solution. And then what you're gonna do is when this thing is in there inside the splash guard lid, you put this on your buffer and you pump this up and down as you run the polisher. And it causes the cleaning solution through the hole in the top of these water squirting cups to force the cleaning solution up into the foam pads. And then as it scrapes across the top of this thing, it kind of squeegees out all the compound polish and wax residue. And that's how these things work. And it works great. And then after you're done pumping it like that for 20 seconds, then you're supposed to lift this up still inside the splash guard lid. Okay, you lift this up so you're kind of off the grit guard thing. Then you turn your speed up, and through centrifugal force, the water slings out. Okay, so that's how they work, and they do work. But still, when it comes to foam pad, your pad is still going to be wet. And as I said a couple times here, dry pads buff the best when it comes to foam, dry pads. So save this for cleaning your pads at the end of the day. Place them out someplace to air dry, and they'll be ready to go for the next day. But it's really what a better idea would be is to get more pads, and as you buff out a panel, put that pad aside and switch to a clean dry pad. Now, when it comes to chemicals, this is a citrus-based pad cleaner, and this stuff works really good. And this comes under a bunch of different brands. This is the Wolfgang brand.
Yeah, turn the label a little bit towards me. The other way. There you go.
This is the Wolfgang brand.
Too bad we didn't have smell vision, because that smells good.
Yeah, it's a citrus base, and it works good. It just emulsifies the junk. And what you can do is take, and as you're working around a car, my antique pad is getting dirty.
Well, you're the one that put it in there.
Get a bucket full of like 3 gallons of water, maybe 4 gallons. Put some of that solution in there. And when you pull the pad off, stick it in there, take your hands and squish it to get the clean solution in there. Just let it soak till the end of the day. Then use the pad cleaner.
Then your cleaning's
or
easier.
then wash it under running water. Or like me, I throw most all this stuff in a washing machine. I mean, look back here. We go through pads at such a scale. I do not have time to clean one pad at a time. So everything goes in a washer.
You be still doing the ones from your class?
Everything goes in the dryer except for my wool pads. And for the most part, they hold up pretty good. Sometimes I lose the Velcro on one.
Yeah, let's go right there because I know our Detailing 101, we always have questions about can you do them in the washing machine. Why don't you give them your technique on using the washing machine?
Okay, first let me say
hot water, cold water, high heat, low heat, all that
at
other
this
stuff.
time, the only company I know of that states you can use the washing machine to wash their pads is Meguiar's. They're soft buff 7-inch pads. It used to be, they said you could wash them in a washing machine. I don't know if that's changed. You might want to check the directions. All the other pad manufacturers, they pretty kind of frown against that because this is just my theory, my guess. Because once in a while, when you wash them in a wash machine and a dryer, the Velcro comes off and then you'll call them and cry, and that takes up a lot of time for an $8 pad. So instead, they just tell you don't do it at all. Now they got nobody calling and crying, see? So once in a while, if you do that, you're gonna lose a pad. Just eat it, okay? If you want to, get some epoxy or some goop glue and glue it back on. I've done that.
Goop glue.
It works pretty good, you know, if you get the pad
Gorilla
clean first.
for the win.
But here's usually what I do is I wash all these pads with a microfiber detergent in the wash machine. We have a wash machine out there with the old-fashioned vane.
In the middle,
so there's
the
lots
agitator.
of agitating action going on. I wash in cold water only because we don't have a water heater out there. If I had a hot water heater out there, I'd wash them all in hot because hot water helps to dissolve and break things down better than cold water. It's really simple to figure out. All you guys out there that have owned anything but a Chevy and it's broken down so you had to replace a starter motor.
What you're saying, Chevy's don't break down.
Chevy's gonna break down. But if you had an old Ford or a Mazda or Porsche, at some point the starter motor breaks, you go down there, you take it out. When you're done, your hands have black sludge that's just impregnated into the pores of your skin. Now you could go to the sink and wash them with soap and cold water, but we all know to wash them with soap and hot water would get them cleaner. So heat helps to release oils and greases and dirts. Same thing in the wash machine.
Melt it.
Now when it comes to the dryer, most people would make the case that using the high heat, because some dryers get pretty darn hot, over time you're gonna cause damage to the foam or the fibers, or in the case of microfiber towels, to the microfiber towels. So I usually use like a medium heat on that and put it on the longest setting. By the time I get back out there, everything's dry. If not, if you could pan over there, look, I got my wool pads, I let them air dry.
I ain't gonna make it over there.
I don't throw my traditional wool pads in the dryer. I do throw them in the wash machine, then I just lay them out to air dry.
And cue the car outside.
So, it's a lot of different ways to clean a pad. In my how-to book, I think I show 5 different ways to clean pads. If you've got a utility sink, that's a really good way. You can just sit there and run it under water and squish it till everything's come out.
You not smoosh it?
And then let it dry. But here's something else. I see a lot of questions about this. People will ask or complain or ask for help getting a wax or a sealant out of a foam pad. Now, the reason it's hard is because by their very nature, waxes and sealants are not water soluble. Your professional grade compounds, I'm using the Pinnacle compound on this old Chevy here, this is water soluble. You could throw this in a bucket mixed with water and it pretty much dispersed throughout the whole thing. If you took a bottle of wax or a bottle of liquid sealant or liquid wax and you dump it in a bottle of water, you're gonna find, just like oil and water, it's gonna separate out. It's not gonna wanna congeal and become one. And the same thing's gonna happen when you try to wash this out of a pad. It's not gonna like the water. It's not even gonna care about the soap. It's gonna get all squishy on you. So one of the things I do is I always wash similar pads with similar pads. I will wash, and you got to remember, we do things on scale here. I might have 25 people in a class, and if we buff out 10 cars in 2 days, we're going to dirty a lot of pads. So I can make complete loads of nothing but RUPES blue coarse foam cutting pads. Complete load, 20, 30 pads in there, and wash them and then dry them and then stack them up and then wash the next tile. So I wash pads that have been used with like chemicals together. And I save all my wax pads. So if, say, we machine, I teach ceramic coating, synthetic scents, and waxes. I like to show everybody everything. But at the end of a class, when everybody's gone home and I'm out here cleaning up the garage and doing laundry, at some point I'm gonna have a whole bunch of soft foam pads of some brand filled full of a liquid wax. And I will throw them in the wash machine and usually run them through like at least 2 times. And they'll come out pretty clean. But they usually won't do it in the first time because waxes, liquid waxes,
you have to break it down a couple times.
Just are not soluble. Even with good chemicals, they're not.
Well, that just shows that they're doing what they're supposed to, repel water.
Anyway, I think that's all we got. I have this here. This is the green paint off of
Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen's Jaguar XK, whatever it
Oh.
was. It's the XK or something like that. It's the Jaguar in the Peterson Museum. When we had our TV show, we buffed it down. It was actually Mike Stoops. He took one of the pads and says, "I'm going to save this because it's got the paint off of a car that Steve McQueen drove." So I did the same thing. I set this thing aside, or maybe it was Joe Fernandez that did that. And our first TV show, Lake Country, they made us some pads
that's going back.
with our logo on the back.
That's when we
I can't find the one for Competition Ready. They actually made us a pad for our Competition Ready TV show. But this was our first TV show called What's in Autogeek's Garage, where you see me stumble around through other people's garages trying to showcase them like a Chris Jacobs or something. And I was better at showing how to detail them than showcase the cars themselves, even though I am kind of a car guy. I think that's all I got. I got one more thing up here. I can show you. That's a spur. That's for cleaning wool pads.
Right.
Rotary buffer.
Yeah, you don't use those on foam.
Don't use it on foam.
Unless you want to saturate, totally destroy your foam.
Here's something a lot of people may not remember this, but probably about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, these were really popular.
Oh, Sure Buff.
The Sure Buff pads. Yeah. This is a pad for finishing out fine wood, like a wood dining room table. And I think it was Kevin Brown actually that discovered these and introduced them to the car polishing world. I think primarily as a cutting pad for extra cut instead of a foam pad. And this is before we had all these different microfiber pads to choose from. But we still have these at Autogeek. I don't see much talk about them anymore, but they're around.
I forgot all about those.
These are called foamed wool pads. They're kind of freaky, but this is a purple
that is
foamed wool.
synthetic wool, correct?
I think it's actually a real wool, but it has a foam.
The foam inside of it, yeah.
It has foam around the fiber, so it's really cushiony, and it gives you a real gentle type cutting. And
is there a difference between the blue and the purple?
One's called the Force Hybrid blue wool pad, and one's called the purple wool pad. I think that's the only difference. And of course, Lake Country just brought something out very similar to it, a foamed wool pad. So it offers good cutting, but also very good polishing, especially on your harder paints. So anyway, lots of pad choices. After I set this up out here, I thought, oh my God, what have I got myself into? Can I talk about all this stuff for an hour?
You've talked about it for an hour and 17 minutes so far.
Okay, but we did. Anyway, and of course, remember the tip I shared at the beginning. When you're working on the large panel, start at the center, work your way out.
That way you don't induce defects into parts that you just did.
You gotta have a system to approach a car that you don't gotta think about each time. It's just a reaction. You just go to work.
All right, cool. Let me bring myself up on here. I'm gonna scroll back through the comments.
There's one more thing we're gonna do, but we'll do that when we shut the video off. And you got to finish out this car, Yancy.
Oh, you got jokes.
I did half the roof. You can do the rest.
Oh, so I get 3/4 of the car. You get okay. Everybody that said hi. Glad you guys are tuning in. The very first question that I have. I got the new Griot's G9 random orbital. What's the smallest backing plate you can use?
The smallest backing plate Griot's recommends is their 5-inch backing plate, spinning, turning, and churning their 5.5-inch pads. I know some guys are going to throw that 3-inch pad on there. What Griot's would say about that is that tool and that backing plate are not optimized. And the other thing is when you put a tiny little backing plate on a big tool, when you're buffing out horizontal surfaces, the tool becomes what's called tippy. It's okay on a vertical side because you're holding the weight of the tool up, but on a horizontal panel, you tend to let the weight of the tool take over, and if you're not careful, it'll tip over, and all of a sudden that tool is on the hood bouncing around.
Hey, that's called the signature.
So there's a difference between can you do it and should you do it. Can you do it? Yes. The 3-inch backing plate from Griot's and other manufacturers has a fine 5/16" thread. It will attach to that tool. Should you do it? I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah.
What I'd rather see you do is go to Autogeek and buy the Griot's G8. And
get a smaller polisher.
Get a smaller tool.
All right, this one I think is funny. I think he's having a jab at you, but what do you call it? It's Robert. So we all know, love, and Robert. Robert DiCerlisi, what year did swirl removal become such a thing?
Gosh, I would have to say go back to the.
You actually have an answer.
Meguiar's launched a video in the early 1980s called Power Polishing, and it was a video with Mike Pennington using the Porter cable on a Mustang hood. And back then, they were the only game in town. They really had the whole system, the tool, the pads, and the chemicals that the average do-it-yourselfer could do this in their garage. And the internet took off in the mid-1990s. I remember reading a statistic that in 1995, AOL only had 500,000 subscribers. Okay, so it was in its growth, and it was a growth industry back then. But as soon as everybody started getting desktop computers and getting on the internet, and then education just kind of started to go out throughout the world, then paint correction or swirl removal became more of a known topic. But I think Meguiar's should get some of the credit, possibly Griot's Garage too, for really introducing.
So early 90s, mid 90s.
No, 80s.
80s?
80s,
Okay.
yeah, in the 80s. Really for introducing the average person to the stuff that the body shop guys probably already knew about. The body shop guys would always be way ahead of it. I wouldn't give the dealerships any credit for this, but body shop guys, this was their bread and butter, was painting cars, sanding them, and then buffing them.
Okay. All right. This one's coming from Philip Treyu. What is your favorite pad to use on a DA, Mike? I know the answer.
It just depends on the DA. I do tend to be a systems guy, so if I'm using RUPES polishers, I always use RUPES pads. If I use Griot's polishers, I'll tend to stick with the Boss pads. You know, believe it or not, the RUPES pads spin and, or as I like to say, turn and churn, and hopefully not burn really well on the Griot's.
If you can't tell, he likes rhyming people.
The Griot's Boss tools. On the Porter cable, I'm a big fan of just your basic, either your Lake Country flat pads, okay, or which are about the size of this right here, but only an open cell. I have access to the Thin Pro, but the Thin Pro are so thin, I don't need to go that thin to get good action out of that. Or I like the Buff and Shine 6-inch pads, okay, or even the Lake Country HDOs or SDOs. All those are really well matched to these smaller 8mm free spinning tools.
Okay.
I am definitely an open cell foam guy, but most of the time when I'm buffing out a car, for at least the correction step, I'm using the Beast. This is the Super Beast, and I'm using these big 6.5-inch force hybrid pads.
Okay. All right. Samuel, I think we answered all your questions about open cell and closed cell while we were talking in the comments. Basically open, it lets stuff in, closed, it keeps it in between the surface and the pad. Still gets saturated, but the open cells are a little bit stronger. Correct?
Yep, that's the nutshell version.
All right. Michael Matchlat. I think I got your name right. I am not the person to be our name. How do you tell hard paint from soft paint?
You know, I cover that in my how-to book.
Oh,
and nobody likes the answer, but if you think about it, here's how. First, you got to buff out a whole bunch of cars, okay? And I explained this in my how-to book, that someone that's brand new, they just got a polisher, pull it out of the box, they walk out to the garage, and they're working on a turquoise 57 Chevy. There's no way they're going to know the difference between hard and soft. They haven't buffed out any paint. But here's how you would tell, is if you took an established brand for a compound. I think most people would recognize Meguiar's Ultimate Compound. You can buy it damn near anywhere. It's pretty much Bubba proof. It'll remove swirls and scratches all day long. If you take that and a simple foam cutting pad or foam polishing pad on a simple tool, and you go out to the hood of a car, you need to do 8 section passes. So you go over the section once, twice, 8 times, wipe off, and swirls and scratches are gone. I think using that compound, you could assume that paint is probably in the medium. It actually could be anywhere. The way you test the paint is you don't do all the section passes. You wipe off and you rate the ratio of defect removal. That's how you test the compound. But it's really hard to know if you're brand new. So I always tell people, as you're buffing out cars, especially if you're doing this for money, once you dial in whatever tool pad and chemical that's going to be your thing, every time you buff out a car, you need to lock into your brain, how well did the scratches come out of that paint? Did
Were
I
you
really
working it
struggle,
harder, or was it like,
or did they just come out? Last year, or this year and last year, I buffed out, I had a 1988 Porsche 928 with the original single stage paint, and I had a 1994 Porsche with the original base coat, clear coat paint. And I corrected those with Lake Country black foam finishing pads and fine cut polishes. Another way of saying that is that paint on both those cars was super, super soft. I corrected it with this pad, okay? So you just have to get experience, but you got to be paying attention, But I'll tell you one thing, if you take an aggressive compound, a foam cutting pad, and a powerful tool out to the card, you put down about 5 pounds of pressure and make 8 section passes, and the swirls and scratches are there, that's probably pretty hard paint. Mm-hmm. The last thing you want to do is make generalizations. I know a lot of people will make
Chevy's this, Ford's that, and all that.
They'll say that. Well, it is pretty consistent to say most Hondas have soft paint. That's fairly known, and that has to do with the type of paints that they shoot over in Japan, basically, and the solvents and the fact that they don't got an EPA to monitor what they're using and injecting into the air. But most people, and myself included, would think that most of the Audis that I've worked on had very hard paint.
Yeah, German.
Yeah, most of the.
I think somebody even actually said that in the comments.
I think Audis have had some of the hardest paints I've ever worked on.
Yeah, Paul Dorset.
But I don't work on tons of Audis. I tend to be a Detroit iron guy. I like stuff like this, just because there's no plastic trim. That's why, because I'm lazy. But I actually have a write-up on. You can Google this. Making generalizations. Add the word car paint and Mike Phillips. Maybe add the word Audi. But when I was still at Meguiar's, two guys came down to Meguiar's with these really cool blue Audi station wagons. They were low factory builds, and that paint was as soft as butter. So me and everybody else, every time we worked on the Audi, it was super hard.
That's gonna be
Here's
hard.
2 factory paint jobs that were so soft, the only way we could finish them out without marring them was with the cleaner wax. That's one of my cheater techniques, by the way. If you've got really soft paint and you're having a hard time finishing out and wiping the product off without reinducing swirls and scratches, one way you can do that is with the quality cleaner wax that you let fully dry, because wax by its very nature is a dry lubricant. You know, it's just like when you wax a set of snow skis or a surfboard, or when I was a kid, Mom gave us a piece of wax paper and we would wax a steel slide. Then you at the park and you go down the slide and you go down really fast. Wax is a dry lubricant. So
you didn't wrap yourself in it, so that way you even had more.
But if you can find a quality one-step cleaner wax and finish out the thin film coat and let it fully dry, as you wipe it off, the wax becomes part of the lubricant, enabling you to wipe it off without putting a scratch back in. That's one of my cheater techniques.
All right, let's go down. Kirby Thompson.
Hey, Kirby.
Yancy, ask Mike later when use microfiber pad compared to a wool type pad versus hard versus soft paints.
Well, hard paints, you just default. If you really need to cut a hard paint, then a fiber pad is going to outperform a foam pad any day of the week, no matter what the tool.
Okay.
So start with fiber and finish out with foam.
Okay. Ivan Campanzano, I think I said your name right. Is it better to polish in the dark or with a garage light on? Well, hopefully you're not in the pitch dark. I hope you have some light.
You know,
because you need light.
Here's the truth about that is there's an article, you can Google this. It's called Wet Sanding Factory Paint versus Custom Paint, add Mike Phillips. And you're going to see a picture of me buffing on a 1956 Lincoln Premier, and you're going to see my test spot in the front driver's fender. And if you look in the place I'm at, I'm in the 3rd level of a 4-level parking garage, and all I have for light are a few 8-foot fluorescent bulbs. And I completely wet sanded, cut, and buffed that car in what I would call low light. And here's the point. If you dial in your test spot, okay, you know, using this compound with this pad for 8 section passes gets that to where I'm happy, you could blindfold me and I could repeat that over the rest of the car and get the same results.
Oh, I think I'm going to put that on a test. That should be a live feed. What do you guys think? Blindfold Mike doing in detail.
Well, my point being is that once you dial in your process, you don't need this light or you don't even need this color painted wall. You're going to repeat the same process to that paint over and over and over again, regardless of the light or the color of the walls.
It becomes just a routine.
It's all about dialing in your test spot. Once you dial in the test spot, you're going to get to the same consistent results unless one of the panels in that car, by chance, has been repainted, and maybe it's softer or harder, and that could throw it off.
But that's very rare. That's not
very rare. And a lot of times, if you're using quality abrasives, tools, and technology and technique, you're still going to get great results, you know.
All right.
But there was an instance where I've come across different panels that were repainted and they didn't cut as well as my initial test spot showed I could get away with. So I had to rethink it and start over something more aggressive.
Yeah, if you see it's not working later on, then
well, that's called focus on the task at hand. Be paying attention. You wipe off and you go, wow, swirls and scratches are still there. Well, maybe something changed on that panel.
Yep. Okay. Rolf Fear. Are CCS pads always thicker, or are they thinner versions out there?
Well, the thinner version is the one that I brought out here, and it's 7/8 right here. This is 7/8 of an inch. So in the smaller size, they're thin, but if you go to the 6.5, they're still about 1.25 inches thick.
They just the width, and then they get one.
I think they actually make a thinner one, but I would have to go check.
I can't remember. Or not.
Yeah, the Autogeek store would have that information, and so would Lake Country Manufacturing, their website.
Kirby Thompson said BS Reflections Kit. We just released a video on that. Go to the Autogeek Facebook page.
Nice kit.
And the Autogeek YouTube page, and that video is on there.
By the way, the new Buff and Shine box kit with Justin Lobato on it, I think That's really a genius idea, but here's how I position that. If you're not sure the pads you need for the tool that you're, everybody, when you first start out, you buy a polisher or whatever it is. And if you're still trying to figure out which pads to get, buying that box kit is going to give you, what is it, 5 or 6 different pads? 5 different pads. And you can try them all out. But the thing is once you go, I really like this
that works
pad
for me and that works for me.
That's when you go buy 20 of them.
Right,
okay?
exactly. No.
You don't go buy 20 kits because you're only going to use like 2 of them. You're only going to gravitate to say 2 or 3 of the
It's kind of like a
pads.
sample box.
That'll be your system. Because every time you buff out a car, it shouldn't be a mystery.
Yeah. Especially if it's your own.
Today.
Especially if it's your own. And it's the same car. You mean it's not
Unless
like
Autogeek is right next to where you live, A lot of people do not have access to the multitude of pads, chemicals, polishers, and backing plates like we offer here. Here's a question while everybody's watching. Does anybody know what this is? I brought this out just by happenstance. Does anybody know what this is?
Answer down below. You'll get Mike to come to your house.
Here's a hint. What color is the border?
It's maroon.
You old timers should know what this is.
Old timers. Now you're really dating your age.
Okay, now I'm gonna put it. I'll put it right here.
You put it right there. All right. Clean pads every couple of sets and probably half a door. They're talking about how often you should clean your pads. I do believe that we covered that.
We covered that, but you take a nylon brush, a pad conditioning brush, and after every section pass or every other section pass, scrape off the residue. You can use the clean the towel on the fly
after
method.
Every panel, then get a different
or switch out to a fresh pad.
All right.
Better results. More pads is better.
More pads, more pad better.
If anybody watching this video right now or into the future when it's on YouTube, if you look at anytime I share a write-up, like at some point I'm going to share a write-up for what I did to this car to take it from where it's at.
Let me go wide because you can't.
Yeah. When I get to the point where I do my write-up, and this thing looks glossy under fluorescence, but it's all swirled out. I always stack up all the pads I use with the tools and the chemicals, and that's to telegraph to you how many pads I used. Again, when you buy a kit, a polisher kit, it'll come with usually 3 pads, a cutting pad, a polishing pad, a finishing pad. That's not what it takes to buff out a car. That's what it takes to get you started.
Okay, we're going back to Philip again. He has another one. Hopefully not a lot of people are using a pressure washer to clean their pads, but hey.
That's a viable way to do it.
Some of them I think would totally.
It's kind of.
I had 1 pad. Now I have 3.
Yeah. Well, as long as you're using common sense. But yeah, if you put a nice fan spray tip on your pressure washer,
not the little point tip, because that will rip right through there.
Right there. But if you got a way to hold it still, like put your foot on it and hold it while you're blasting.
I would stay away from pressure.
But some guys do that. Your wool pads. But for me, I throw them in the wash machine and throw them in the dryer.
I would stay away from anything like that because then you're getting your body parts in there, and thoughts on cheap pads from places like AliExpress. I don't even know what that is.
Alibaba Express or AliExpress. Well, here's the deal: is
it could go to that foam that you.
I've only looked at the foam pads down at Harbor Freight one time, but I remember when I did look at them, they had like 3 or 4 different colors, and it also like the same foam, just a different color. It wasn't like one was a sharp cutting pad. One was a polishing pad, one was a finishing pad. It was all the same foam, just different colors. And all the comments I read about them is they don't last very long. So, look, pads are relative. In context, are they expensive? I don't know. You can make a lot of money off 5 or 6 pads buffing out a car if you're charging right.
Right.
You get a lot of use out of the pads. So, I don't really think pads are the most expensive component of owning a detailing business. Or even if you own a car like this or a brand new Honda. If you've got enough money to own either one, you should have enough money to buy a dozen pads. Yeah. So it isn't the most expensive thing in the world for the hobbyist, enthusiast, or the professional. So just buy good pads and don't regret it. No one ever.
The other thing is the quality of the pad. You got to think that's one of the things that is touching your paint.
It's the second most important factor. Abrasive technology is the most important because it's touching the paint first, then the pad, then the tool, and then you. So pads, using the right pad for the process is key. And using cheap pads is just not a recipe for success.
All right. We have a lot of people asking go-to paint pad combo for Chevy paint, black paint, GMC paint. That's just where.
No, first of all, it starts with what tool do you have.
Yeah.
Because the tool's going to determine the pad you use.
Exactly.
So figure out your tool and your pad. But there's a thing called doing a test spot, and that's where you test the least aggressive product to get the job done. What that means is usually to start out with something like a foam finishing pad and a fine cut polish. If you got a car that's obviously swirled out, that's not going to be aggressive enough. So you'd at least start in the polishing range with the medium cut polish. If that didn't work, then you could go to a compound and a cutting pad. But to me, everything starts with doing a test spot, but it also means you have to have finally figured out what brand of compound, brand of polish, and brand of, the word is AIO, cleaner wax, and AIO, all in one. You need to find these three things. Those are going to be the three primary things you use to correct paint: compounds, polishes, and AIOs. And I talk about this all the time. These three categories of products, they either use great abrasive technology or they use crap for abrasive technology. There's really no other way to say it. If they use crap, you're going to get what's called micromarring because the abrasive technology isn't any good. And there's no way I can take lots of technique and make the thing that's touching the paint, scratching it, stop scratching it.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, if you ever look at my write-ups, like I never use junk. I only use the best stuff. And I use a wide range of stuff we sell, but if I'm using it, you can trust it uses great abrasive technology. I just wrote a brand new review for Dr. Beasley's nano surface primers, and I tested it on black paint. I said, this is some amazing abrasive technology. I just wrote a review for the 3D1 and the new 3D paint coating, and I said the 3D1, it's a compound polish. It's amazing abrasive technology. So, over here I'm using the Pinnacle Advanced Compound. You cannot go wrong with this product. It's 50 or 60 bucks a quart, but so is 3M Finesse. There's products that are on the top shelf, just like a good tequila. You're not going to go wrong if you
quality isn't cheap and cheap isn't quality.
Yeah, if you pick substandard stuff, or there's a couple brands out there. I see this all the time in the blogosphere where people say, "Hey,
you're one to say something else."
I see, "Hey, I buffed up my car. It's a black Corvette, and now the paint looks gray." Okay, then they say what they use, and automatically go, gosh, how many times have I got to read this? People keep buying this stuff and graying their paint out with it. What the gray is anytime you scratch something clear, say a windshield, if I got a wiper mark, what color is the scratch?
It's going to be a whitish gray.
It's opaque. It's white. When you scratch clear coat, you make it gray. You make it opaque. You're seeing this opaqueness with black underneath. You're making it gray. That is called micromarring. And every time, I primarily work on the Autogeek forum, and every time someone comes up, I say, hey, tell you what, let me just send you a sample of something that uses great abrasive technology. Go over that thing that you used, and all of a sudden you'll see the paint go perfectly clear again. So the most important thing when it comes to polishing paint is you've got to start out with great abrasive technology because it's touching the paint first. In fact, you care if I just show you this? I'll do a quick demo.
All right, then I got one more. Actually, while you're setting up, Paul Dossett. Paul. It said it's a polishing cloth. Your cloth that you held up. Yes? No?
What's that?
Polishing cloth.
Oh, what about it?
That's what you have up there. The polishing cloth.
Oh, what is it?
Yeah, polishing cloth.
Wrong. It is a polishing cloth. Well, what is it? Here it is. It's the first microfiber towel introduced to the public by Meguiar's. That's why it has a maroon. Meguiar's now is known as the Men in Black, but they used to be the Men in Maroon.
Okay.
And Mike Pennington gave me that when I was down in Meguiar's.
Original microfiber towel.
It's one of their.
Jeff Ness.
Well, Meguiar's is one of the bigger names that had products at the retail level. Nowadays, you find some at retail level, but it wasn't like that back in the 80s. But they brought this towel out and introduced, for the most part, the American public to microfiber towels.
Yeah, Jeff Ness is the one that actually named it. Original microfiber towel by Meguiar's.
Okay, so this is just real simple here. I've put some compound on my pad.
All right.
And when I turn this on and I polish on the paint here, it's real simple. Look, what's touching the paint first? The abrasives.
Exactly.
What's behind the abrasives?
It is the pad.
The pad. What's behind the pad?
The backing
The
plate.
tool. What's behind the tool?
You.
The other tool. The guy. I am the least important thing here. The most important thing is the stuff touching the paint. It's doing the work. And if you start with crap, you're going to get crap. You got to start with great abrasive technology, and you can't help but get great results as long as you then match the pad for the product and the process you're doing. You wouldn't use a soft finishing pad if you got heavy swirls with a compound. That wouldn't make sense. You'd use a foam cutting pad. So that's what I mean by matching the right pad. But as long as you're using great abrasive technology, I mean, I show, wow, the hood of this has single stage paint. The roof is clear cut. I've only buffed out the roof so far.
Have fun. Yeah,
So-
and you're saying that the pinstripes were all under clear? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, there's pinstripes on here, people, with glitter inside the
And
flares.
here's a good reason to do a test spot on each panel.
Yeah, find out exactly what you're getting
Instead of
yourself
just
into.
assuming that the whole car is basically clear coat. And that, it's possible that could be a
The reshoot hood.
turquoise. No, it could be a turquoise overspray on a clear coat.
Well,
Yeah, it could be. I've seen it before.
well, you've been around long enough. All right, let's go one more question, 'cause you guys got a bunch of them in here. Let me. Okay, I think this is a good one. I think we covered it. Jahir Valencia, can we use pads for polished aluminum trim bumpers, wheels without clear coat? If yes, what kind of pads? Can you use pads for doing metal?
Yeah, I showed at the beginning of this class.
Well,
I
he
run
might
my-
not have been here at the beginning.
Yeah, if you look at this orange pad that turned kind of gray, if you go back when this goes up on YouTube and watch the video from the beginning, I was giving a tip and a technique for buffing out panels, how you start in the center and then work your way out. You don't start on the edge and work your way in. And then I explained that whenever I'm buffing out a car, whatever my first step product is, in this case it's a compound, but sometimes I'm just using a cleaner wax. But whatever the first step product is, while I'm using it, I hit the glass and run it over the trim. I don't get a fresh
The
pad.
metal trim.
Yeah, metal trim. I don't get a fresh dedicated pad. I wait till I'm going, I'm about ready to change this pad out. Before I do, I'm going to run it over the trim and the glass. This type of stuff doesn't really care what you use on it. If it's clear coat safe, it's safe for glass and trim. And you can see it pulled all the oxidation off and brightened up the trim. And then when the customer picks up the car, not only is the paint glossy, the glass is glossy and the trim is really bright. So the whole presentation is boom, look how nice my car looks.
Just because you're just so good. All right. I think that was about it for all the questions out there. I am bringing this to you because I want you by tomorrow morning to have me 30 different pads done.
Well, I'm going to finish buffing out this car, and I'm going to try to get it done really fast by just simply going with the bigger pad.
All right, everybody, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. I know this one ran a little bit longer. We're only 15 minutes short of 2 hours, so this was a big topic, as you can tell. So remember, next week we'll be back at 3 o'clock on Tuesday. Tell your friends, tell your buddies, make your popcorn, get your notes ready. And Mike, do we know what we're doing next week?
Something related to car detailing.
Safe bet. Safe bet. All right, everybody, stay safe, and we see you next time. Bye, y'all.
See ya.